In failed states, toward the end of the book, you do point out that often critics of the system are denounced for being negative and never having anything positive to put forth. And you address that criticism with some very specific suggestions about solutions.
Yeah, very unoriginal suggestions. Those suggestions just happen to be supported by a large majority of people in the United States. And I think they're good suggestions. They would change the country significantly. There's nothing radical about them, but they're off the agenda. That's part of the serious collapse of democratic institutions. I mean, there's a lot of talk right now about how it's a divided country. We have to bring it together, red and blue, the Baker-Hamilton commissions, bringing them together. It is a divided country, but not the way that's being discussed. It's divided between the public and the power systems, the government and the corporate system. Yeah, big gap between them. So these examples here are chosen from public opinion studies and are supported by, in most cases, very large majorities of the population. And I think they're all quite sound proposals. They can't be discussed because of the same gap. And in fact, talking about Bolivia before, it's rather striking to compare Bolivia with the United States. Actually, there's a lot of talk now in the liberal press, in the left liberal press, about how we have to do something about our electoral processes, because you don't trust the voting machines, and some people don't have a chance to vote, and they don't count, there's fraud, and so on. Yeah, maybe all correct, but it's kind of like a footnote. Now, the real problem is we don't have elections. You don't have elections when the issues that the population is concerned about do not arise on the electoral agenda. In Bolivia, in contrast, they actually had a free election, a serious one, last year. Huge participation. Everybody knew the issues. The issues were important. They didn't just come on voting day. They'd been struggling about those issues for years, like in Cochabamba, with the protests there where I think a couple dozen people were killed. There were mass popular organizations. They elected someone from their own ranks. That's an election. I mean, it's so remote from conceivability in the West, certainly the United States, that it's incredible. So yeah, this is one illustration of the enormous gap between public opinion and public policy on a host of issues, quite a lot of issues. And we see it every day. I mean, I was driving home the other day and listening to NPR, my masochist streak, and they happened to have a long segment on Barack Obama. Very favorable, really enthusiastic. I mean, this new star coming on the political firmament and so on. That must have gone on for 15 minutes. I was listening to see, are they going to say anything about his position on any issue? Any issue? Nothing. I mean, just about the image. I mean, I think they may have had a couple of words about, he's in favor of doing something about the climate or something. What are his positions? Well, it just doesn't matter. And you read the articles, it's the same. He gives hope. He has an image of, I don't know what, he's just a wonderful, he looks right into your eyes when you talk to him. I mean, that's what's considered significant. Not, shall we control our own resources? Shall we nationalize our resources? Shall we have water for people? Shall we have health systems? Shall we stop carrying out aggression? I mean, no, that's not mentioned. Because our electoral system, our political system has been, not degenerated is the wrong word, it has been driven to a level of, to such a low level that issues are completely marginalized. And the mechanisms are understood. We've talked about them. Elections are run by the same people who sell toothpaste. They market candidates the same way. You're not supposed to know the information about toothpaste. You're not supposed to know the information about candidates. And they don't. Take the congressional elections just in November. They're interpreted as kind of a referendum on Iraq. The population wants to get out. Well, maybe they were, but do you know the position of the Democratic candidates who were elected on Iraq? Well, maybe 2 or 3 of them, For the most part, you don't know what their positions were. We don't like it. That's a position.
It's not going well.
It's not going well. We're not doing too well. Let's do something. But was the voice of the population heard? No. Or take the major issue coming up, Iran. And the population has an opinion on that, on the Iranian nuclear issues. I forget the numbers, but the overwhelming majority of the population is in favor of diplomatic initiatives rather than confrontation. I don't even think that's been reported. It's certainly not discussed. American public opinion doesn't count, just as Iraqi public opinion doesn't count. So take the Baker Hamilton, the ISG report again. It's quite interesting to read. It's mostly interesting for what it doesn't say. So one of the things it doesn't say is what the population of Iraq wants. That's never mentioned. Actually, it's interesting how they skirt it. They cite the U.S. government polls. There are U.S. government and other Western polls, which do tell us a lot about that. And they cite the polls, but not that. They cite the figure that says that the proportion of Iraqis who think it's legitimate to attack American soldiers has increased. It's now a majority. And they cite that. And the conclusion is, well, we have to do something to readjust our tactics so they don't see us as occupiers or something. So let's make a tactical adjustment. Those very same polls, some by the State Department, some by Western polling agencies, say that in Baghdad, 2/3 of the population wants the U.S. troops out immediately. And the large majority in the country as a whole wants a firm timetable for withdrawal in less than a year or less, maybe 6 months to a year or something like that. Well, that's what the Iraqi people want, according to Western U.S. polls. That's not mentioned, just as the opinion of the American people on the issues listed here or on Iraq and so on is just not taken into account. And if you look at American public opinion, since, I think, April 2003, right after the invasion, a considerable majority, maybe around 2/3, here in the United States, thought that U.S. forces should be kept in Iraq under the auspices of the United Nations, not leading the occupation. That happens to be the same position that the Spanish population voted on a year later. They voted for that. They didn't vote to withdraw. They voted to keep Spanish troops there only under UN supervision, position of the U.S. population, the majority. The difference is that in Spain you could vote on it. Here nobody even knows it because it's kept under such tight control. Well, that's deterioration of democratic institutions. And yes, there are plenty of positive policies which are very straightforward, and they come straight from majority opinion. We should ask who we are and what we do. I mean, for example, when Chavez gets prolonged applause at the General Assembly, instead of ridiculing the rhetoric, we ought to be asking why. What is leading to the fact that public opinion polls, even in Europe, let alone the rest of the world, regard the United States as a major threat to world peace and even to their own existence? What is that coming from? It's not enough to say they hate us because of our freedom. No, they don't. In fact, take a look at yourself, see what you're doing. What have we done to Iran for the last 50 years? What are we doing to Iraq right now?